Hello guys, welcome back. I am Dallas. Thank you for joining me today. I think you're going to have a ton of fun today because we are exploring the color blue. Who doesn't love blue? I'm sure there's a shade of blue that you really resonate with. And today we are going to just completely exhaust your whole blue palette. So I want you to pick out the blues that are in your palette. Maybe you have a cool blue and a warm blue. And maybe you have the cyan color in the primary colors that we're really stressing in this course, which is cyan, magenta, and yellow. Maybe you have that one. And so I want you to pull out all of the blues in your palette that you would consider to be a bluish color. And I'm going to test mine out so that you can see my range, and you can test yours out to see your range. All right, I have all my things ready and we have a lot to cover, so let's just dive right in. The first question I want to ask you is if maybe you've had a preconception that blue is another one of the primary colors. Remember when we learned about red? Now I want you to think, is there something in my palette that I can mix together to make blue? Well, I propose that there is. So why don't you look down at my paper here? I have a magenta and cyan math equation of sorts. And if we're going to go by what this guide says, this CMYK primary mixing wheel, we've got cyan, we've got magenta, and it looks like a mixture of both of these colors would give us blue. So let's test this theory. So I will take my cyan color, I'm just going to put it right on the paper, and wash my brush out again. I want pure colors here. And I've made a purplish color. So I think I'll go back into cyan, but I think this might do it right here. I think I have mixed a pretty beautiful blue. Look at that. Look at that. We have made the color blue. So now you know that red is not primary, nor is blue. You learn something new every day. If you have these two colors and you've done that mixture, be sure to mark that on your paper. And as you can see here, I have cyan, and we're gonna just compare cyan next to other blues that you might have in your palette. And I have a few more on the other page if we have time. So pull out your blues. As I talk about these two colors, I've got Prussian blue here. I bought for the first time last year and I've really liked it a lot, so I use it more often. And also indigo is something new that I'm playing with, so I'm going to learn about my blues compared to some old blues that I used to use, and you're going to learn about yours. But one thing I want to point out about tube paints especially, or really any paint that comes in a palette, if it's at least professional grade, and sometimes with academic grade paints, there will be a color code on there, and that's called the pigment number. So if you look on the back of any of your watercolors, there should be the pigment like PB27, or it will have another combination of letters and numbers, and that's the pigment number. From one brand of color, you could have a cobalt or an ultramarine that is one mixture of pigments, the pigment number, and you could have that same mixture of pigments be a different color name in another brand. So if you're curious, you can look at the back and you can compare recipes. In my opinion, it doesn't really matter. As long as you know your colors and what they can do for you, you're gonna be set. So whatever you've purchased, whatever you have, get that out and we're gonna just explore it no matter what the recipe is. I'm gonna go right into the cyan. And again, let's try to do full saturation and then less saturation. Here's my Prussian blue for you to compare against. And I think I'll take this into here and add, there we go. Okay, so interesting. And then remember that colors, after they dry, they look a little different. They usually look a little lighter. So wait until your colors dry to really make a call on something if you have to really know that you need a particular color. Here is indigo, and I've placed the, wow, that's dark. Wowee, that's super dark. I've placed the pigment number at the top there if you're curious as to what my recipe is in the tube that I'm using this time. And so we've used cyan, which was PB 15:3, and we've used Prussian blue, which is PB 27, and then again we've got indigo PB K6, and then ultramarine PB 29 is what I'm doing next. Now I'm dipping into a palette that I haven't used in a long time, and there are two different ultramarines in it. So I'm going to pull both out, and you can tell, ooh, that's lovely, how different these ultramarines are, or maybe how similar they are. I just don't remember the tube they came from, so I can't tell you the recipe this time. Okay, already I think they're behaving a little differently. So I'm sure there's something different there. But they are definitely in the same range. So now I will pause because I want to show you that if I hold up my magenta and cyan mixture that I thought looked blue and compare it next to these blues, what I'm noticing is that I mixed a warmer blue than most of these. And the warmest blue that I've put from my palette, I think, is probably this ultramarine. This I would definitely say is cool, and it's very saturated, so it has more types of pigment in it. So when you get all these recipes that are 2, 3, 4 different pigments all in one, it's usually going to be a little bit of a more saturated, darker color because there's more pigment in it, and it's going to be a little bit closer to black. Because if you think about black, black is a mixture of all the colors together in some recipe ratio. Okay, so Prussian, we've got, I would say it's definitely warmer than this cyan color, because I would say that this cyan color looks a little greener than this, which looks a little purpler. So again, color temperature with blues. Let's look at our wheel here to help us to try to determine the color temperature of a blue. You want to think, is it closer to red or magenta or purple? That would be considered warm. Or is it closer to the green spectrum, which would mean that there's some amount of yellow in it, so that would be a cooler blue. And I know that blues can be confusing because you just don't know where the barometer is on them temperature-wise, but if you just stick to going back to the wheel, go to what you know about green and what you know about purple, and try to determine from that, I think you're going to be set. Okay, so these haven't dried yet, and I have a couple on the other sheet that I want to try, which are something you might not think to do is if you have a Payne's gray in your palette. Payne's gray is actually a very blue gray, and I really like it a lot. I know it's made up of several pigments, and again, the recipe definitely differs from brand to brand. And then you might have a viridian color, which is kind of like an emerald color. So why don't I take this piece of paper off? While I'm doing that, I want you to label your blues that you've already made and label your recipe for your magenta and cyan. Here I have space for Payne's gray, which this one was actually a gift from a friend. And so I don't have the pigment recipe, but this one is begging to be pulled out to see what the value range is. And you can do value range on all of your blues. Again, your recipe sheet doesn't have to look like mine. I have different questions than you have. So if you want to see your full value range, pull your color all the way out. And let's see how this viridian color compares to this Payne's gray. I might have to wake mine up here a little bit. I think this will be interesting. I think this is about how dark I've managed to get my viridian. Pulling it out, and you can already see that this color does not have as large of a value range as the Payne's Gray next to it. And now you can compare your Viridian or your Payne's Gray or something like it to your other blues, and that would be a really interesting comparison as well. All right, now that we've been exploring color more and you are getting more familiar with your palette, I'm going to give you more and more freedom in these lessons as we go along. So you are going to take what you know and what you found out in this blue lesson, and I want you to find as many shades of blue as you can. You can use your Viridian, your Payne's Gray, your whole spectrum of blues, your cyan, your magenta, and your cyan. And you can even use a little bit of yellow if you're trying to cool up your blues. You can even use a little more magenta, or maybe you have a cool red that you want to introduce to try to get something to be more purple. Say, if you have a more green shade of blue, try to add some cool red or some magenta to that so that you can try to get it back to like a neutral blue. And now for the overachievers out there, I know there's some of you. Maybe after this exercise, what you can do is you can go outside, look at the sky, pick out a patch of the sky and try to color match that blue. Now that you know more about blue and you know more about value, I want you to think about how you can get that patch of sky, color blue, onto your paper. If you don't have sky, maybe you're by the sea, maybe you can do a patch of ocean blue. And if you don't have either of those things ready for you to access, pick a very blue object and try to color match that blue. Remember what you know about temperature and remember what you know about your blues now. All right, I will see you in the next lesson. Bye. Hello again. Are you taking level 1 or are you going to do the level 2 assignment and be an overachiever today? If you are going to do the sky, I want to just plant the seed in your mind right now that that is one part of landscape painting. Landscape painting is difficult, but it's also very rewarding and really fun. In my intermediate course, there are several videos that will help you do landscape painting better, and it will help you do a better job of painting outdoors. So check the description box below or go to my website at bestowingthebrush.com to see more on that. But for now, go ahead and start mixing up your blues, match that color of sky if you can, and then after those color exercises are done, your next video to watch will be the color video about green. I'll see you there. Bye.